Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Catalyst webinar series presented by the Education Committee for the Southern California PGA. The Catalyst webinar series is a weekly educational platform for creating success and change in your club and career. We're very excited to introduce Spencer Dennis of CoachNow, who's with us this morning. Spencer is a coach, entrepreneur, and product designer for CoachNow. He's become a popular speaker and a leader in sports and learning technology since founding CoachNow 7 years ago. Originally, CoachNow was known as Edufy. His consistent mission of improving coaching and teaching relationships via mobile and integrated technology comes not only from his 20,000 hours logged as a high-performance coach, but the thousands of coaches he now interacts with via the CoachNow platform. Spencer is a true coach at heart, so when he's not busy running CoachNow, he's working with other entrepreneurs and creatives to help them bring their dreams to life. He currently lives in Marina del Rey with his 6-year-old son, Shay, and his fiancee, Jess. Good morning, Spencer. Thanks for being on the Catalyst webinar this morning. How are you?
All right. I'm good. Good morning. Yeah, glad to be here and glad to be talking to some fellow golf professionals because that was my background, so glad to be here.
Fantastic. Well, it's all yours. Take it away. I'll monitor the question box for questions from the audience, and away we go.
All right. So I'm going to launch into kind of a full screen view here. If anybody has any issues, please make us aware of that as far as seeing what I'm showing. I definitely don't want to be out of sync with everyone. So let's just see how this goes here. All right. So I'm hopeful everybody can see that. It seems like I still have the go to webinar menu, so that's good too. All right, so before we kind of dive into the slides, I just want to speak a little bit about my background so you get a better understanding of where I'm coming from. John did a nice job with the overall intro, and that was very nice. But I want to make sure that we can kind of bond a little bit over my golf career since that's everybody that's here. So as John said, I used to coach, and I still coach kind of in a different way. But once upon a time, I played golf at a high level, mini tours, kind of those lower developmental tours, and was about to go to Q school and had some injuries that ended up taking me out of competitive golf. But then I started coaching, and I was director of instruction at a club in Thousand Oaks area at Sunset Hills, which probably a lot of you know about. And then I started working with International Junior Academy. So I started working with the IJGA and then the Gary Gilchrist Academy. And I did that for quite a bit of time. And then as I left those particular worlds, I started coaching independently once again. And as a part of that, I was working with mental professionals, college recruiters. I was even like the swing coach for a college golf program. And during all of that time, I was always looking for a way to pass along the information needed for my athletes to improve and also make sure that everybody that was working with them was in sync. And it was a real big challenge, especially 7+ years ago when I was doing this. And again, I was working with highly motivated people, but even working with other professionals or even national team players from other countries, and even in that golf academy world that I described, keeping everybody in sync was just brutal. It was so difficult. I was spending an extra 30 or 40 hours a week outside of my normal coaching sessions, trying to text, email, send all the information around to everybody. And it was just not working flat out. So I was lucky enough to have a couple of really smart friends that were in the tech space. And back then, cloud computing became a thing, mobile technology to where coaches like yourselves would actually use tablets or phones for recording instead of just a big old camera. And social media became more popular. So with all those kind of things magically coming together at one time, we were able to put together a technology that now is in 60+ sports and 140 countries, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But my goal with my time with you today is to not make this just like a major CoachNow sales pitch. My hope is to just kind of educate you as best I can in what we've learned over the years about the business of coaching and what we call connected coaching. And a lot of you, or all of you, right, we've all been going through this pandemic together, and it's forced a lot of us, maybe not myself, I shouldn't include me in this conversation that way, but it's forced a lot of coaches to adopt technology where they didn't have it before, because especially if you are on the lesson tee every day and you're not using something to stay connected to your athletes, when everybody had to go inside and work remotely, a lot of coaches were not prepared for this. But those that were already adopting technology or using something like what we have, a lot of those actually thrived during this time. They'd seen record revenue and they were able to create new programs. So with that kind of preamble here, let's dive into it. All right, I guess that's what we're doing here. All right, so the goals that we want to talk about initially is we want to effectively coach, communicate, and collaborate. So as we go through this, let's just talk about the basics of coaching, right? So you've got your formats, your one-to-one or small group, hourly packages, or subscriptions, in-person, remote, or what we call connected. And I know this is kind of just boilerplate stuff, but the reason why I wanted to bring this up is that there's a lot of different formats in how we coach, and I think it's important that we utilize likely all of them, or at least drive towards some of them, towards the right-hand side of this, specifically around the subscriptions and the idea of being connected. So like I was saying before, if your whole business is focused on one-on-one instruction and you don't have any technology to stay connected between those sessions, it's going to be very difficult for you to build some sort of scalable and reliable business model. And then if we look at the hourly versus packages, right, we kind of move over to the subscriptions. I'm always advocating for the coaches around the world that use our platform. And again, they're in so many sports in these different countries. We're always very happy to see coaches create different offers, right? So when I do remote coaching webinars for our customers, right, where we have a few hundred people on a webinar like this, and we're talking about the remote coaching best practices, we're diving into how to structure your packages, how to build out your website to deliver your offer and tell your story, how to manage your social media. And then at the end, once you get a lead, how to convert that lead, and then how to actually retain that customer. And CoachNow, the best part about what we do is we're a retention and relationship platform. So that's what we really pay attention to when we're coaching everybody on kind of how to build their business. So what we've seen, and I think this is just something for you guys to consider, and again, this is just meant to be a very high level overview. If you want to know more about this kind of thing as far as remote coaching, we'll dive more into the specifics later. But really what we've seen a lot of coaches do, and I encourage you to think about this, is when they come into packages, we've seen more and more annual plans being sold. And the reason why is that you can forecast your revenue, you can then use that revenue to then invest back into the business. And if you have some technology to monitor the progress along the way, we've seen coaches selling $10,000 a year plans to junior athletes and selling out, just as one small example. And what that does is it really allows you to deliver a solid experience because you know that you have this particular money set aside to run your business. The other is subscriptions. So you could consider that annual package a subscription if you wanted. But what we've seen is a lot of coaches build out models where it's a mixture of in-person and remote, and that's what we would call connected. And the reason why is that you have this bridge between the sessions. You're not losing them when they go off for a week or two. You're able to monitor and collaborate with them. And more importantly, if you're working with youth athletes, you're able to keep the parents in sync all along the way, which keeps everybody happy. So what we're seeing is some coaches go, okay, well, I'll see you 2 hours a week, or sorry, 2 hours per month in person. And the rest of the time I will monitor you via CoachNow. And for that, I'll be charging you $300 to $500, something like that a month. So we can dive into that more at the end if you have questions around how other coaches are doing that. This definitely is an open Q&A world, so I would encourage you to ask those questions if you have them. And then as we kind of bump down past the format, one of the things that I'm really passionate about is creating this holistic and relationship-focused coaching model, right? So it's not about the quick fix. It's not about just the Band-Aids. It's about creating a long-lasting relationship and setting realistic expectations. And as you set those realistic expectations on how someone actually gets better at something, you're actually building a very solid business model for yourself as well. Because nobody's going to get better within 1 hour. So we always are advocating, please use hourly time as assessment time and put people into longer term programming through packages or subscriptions, however you wanted to focus that. So we're going to be building the person, not just the technical side of it. But we want to be able to focus on technical, mental, and physical. We want to be holistic and cover all those areas. And if you're using technology correctly, you're going to be creating autonomous athletes, right? People that are out there that know what they need to do. They have access to the right information and the right people, and they're out there having success. So we want to communicate efficiently, right? We want to communicate in one place versus all these different places, right? We don't want to be communicating with our athletes via, email, text, which would be the basic ones, but then Facebook, Instagram, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? That just creates this disparity that's really difficult. So we want to pull everybody into one spot, and that would be a really big goal for all of us, whether it's CoachNow or anything. The goal would be to dictate how you communicate to your athletes. The other, especially if you are looking to work with other people in your coaching practice, or even just parents, honestly, is you want to be clear without needing a bunch of phone calls, right? So you need a place where you can document what you're doing, and that it becomes very clear to the people that are involved, so you don't have to rely on phone calls all of the time. And you want it to be direct to the people that it needs to go to, and mobile, right? So I don't know if I'm going to speak to this directly in another slide, so I'll speak to it now. It's our belief for sure, and we've seen it time and time again over the years, that if you don't have a mobile app on someone's device representing your relationship to them, you will lose them to somebody that does, right? So if you're just using Facebook or email, these kind of just ambiguous platforms to run your coaching or teaching business, you're going to lose them to somebody else that has something dedicated. Now, it doesn't have to be branded, because there comes a big cost and a lot of complications that I can answer later if anybody has questions about that. But most importantly, they need a place that's just dedicated to that relationship with you. Beyond that, we want to have everything aggregated, right? So this goes into the one place versus many. We want everyone and everything in one spot. So collaboration. Now this is a big one for us here, and this is one of the foundational elements of building this platform. And what we see technology, like the major benefit of technology, is for seamless collaboration. More importantly, the visual of having the athlete in the center. So far too often, and this still happens today, but this happened way back when I was creating this platform, is that I would deliver some coaching to the athlete for 1 or 2 hours. The athlete would then go and talk to their parents. And at that point, the parents would be asking, how did it go? What'd you learn, right? And then the athlete, because there's just so much information coming at them, and this is all new to them, they had a very difficult time relaying that information. Now, you expand that out to other coaches, recruiters, et cetera, and it is a complete nightmare. So the problem is that the athlete has a lot of excitement, a lot of joy for what they're doing, but because there's confusion, there's earlier burnout, there's conflict with the parents or the other representatives or the stakeholders in the relationships, and it becomes a big problem. So I say, yes, parents matter too, and a lot of coaches, and this picture on the right is showing the IMG Academy out in Florida that we work with. A lot of people view parents potentially as a challenge or an adversary rather than a teammate, but more often than not, the reason why parents sometimes manifest in a very difficult position is because they really don't know what's going on. So when we went to IMG and I did a presentation there in front of hundreds of coaches, right, over time, because we were working with every program to get them on board, a lot of the coaches had issues with the parents, and it became clear the reason why is because these parents are paying a big dollar amount for their student or their children to go to this big academy, but very rarely did they actually know what was going on. So if you can put parents into an environment where they can passively see what's happening, there's going to be less of this conflict or friction, and there's also going to be way less of the athlete being confused because everyone's moving on the same path. So if you don't have something that's pulling everyone together in that way, it would, obviously that's why we're here. Strongly encourage you to think about that. The other, as far as a business standpoint, is if you can bring in effective collaboration with other professionals, right, complementary professionals, you're gonna have a big opportunity to grow your business. So a very quick story about that for my personal life is when I was coaching, 7 or 8 years ago, the way that I was able to launch my business moving into a new area after leaving the academy world was syncing up with a well-known mental trainer and fitness trainer. And as a result of that, we were actively collaborating as best we could back then. and passing referrals back and forth to each other. We would also do kind of really high-end clinics and camps and kind of golf schools, right, where we could have all these different experts participating. Someone like Martin Chuck does a fantastic job of those golf school with multiple kind of practitioners, let's say, in Arizona. If you're looking to launch golf schools, he'd be a great person to pay attention to for that. But as a young person in a new area, that was a way that I was able to really grow my business. But it became very challenging because we didn't have the technology needed to kind of sync everybody together, as I've said a few times already, which was a big part of what led to building this. All right, so the challenges, I've kind of hinted along the challenges as well. So let's just dive into it, right? So all those things I mentioned before are what we're looking for, right? We want to coach more effectively, communicate more effectively, and collaborate more effectively. But there's things blocking us all the time, right? Especially if you're working with, youth athletes. There's literally trillions of dollars being spent every year to distract us, right? Distract us as a world, right? As a human race. So it's especially difficult for anybody that's young, and you see here the little screenshot with all these notifications, and that's probably pretty limited in a lot of our youth athletes standpoint, right? But as coaches, we want to communicate a lot of different content to make sure that the athletes are going to have what they need, and the parents and everybody else are going to have what they need as well, right? So in the world of golf, you've got your analysis, you've got your launch monitor data, you might have your wearable data with something like K-Vest, you might just want to share workouts or scorecards. You might even encourage just handwritten notes, right? All this stuff is great, but if it lives in different platforms and requires different logins, or if you're communicating all of this through a Dropbox or an email, it's going to be very difficult for anybody to have any sort of clue of what's going on, let alone track the progress. So from day one, our big goal was to say, okay, well, how can we bring the media, data, and the comms that are everywhere and nowhere into one spot, right? This centralized platform. So if you're a coach that likes to use these different technologies, more power to you, you should be, right? Because it's going to give your athletes what they need to improve. But we want to make sure that you can communicate and collaborate and track this kind of content and this data along the way. So this is one of my favorite slides, and I've used this for a long, long time. So I just encourage you to really think about this as I go through this, is that this is something called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. Now, I know most of you are probably familiar with the 10,000 hours to become an expert, that way of thinking. And it's our belief, and a lot of other people's beliefs at this point, that it roughly takes that amount of time, if you're going to buy into that, because we forget more than what we remember, right? If we can't remember what to practice, how are we supposed to have quality practice, right? So when we built the platform, we really followed this book called The Talent Code when it first came out. That was a big inspiration of mine, right? Deep practice, expert coaching, and ignition. But if we just talk about the deep practice part, how the heck, again, are you supposed to be able to practice if you can't remember? So this essentially says that, again, you're not going to have 100% retention from a session anyway, but as you leave the session, you're going to forget more and more and more, right? So within 24 hours, you're going to lose about 40% of what you started at anyway. And over a week, you're going to lose about 90% without proper review and kind of consulting whatever you were learning there, right? So we say retention equals retention. So the reason being is if you can help an athlete retain more information, they're going to improve, right? Because they're going to know what to practice, how to practice it, and they're going to be motivated to do so, right? A confused mind will have just massive inaction, right? They will not go practice because they're confused. It's not because they don't want to. So we all have athletes out there that are seemingly lazy, but I would boil it down to more often than not, they just don't know what to do. So they don't have a lot of motivation when they get out to the range, and they're just kind of clueless, right? So if you can help an athlete retain more information, inherently they're going to get better, and you are going to retain them as clients, as customers, however you view them, right? And that's a big deal. That's ultimately the business of coaching, is retention. So I usually follow a lot of folks at conferences about marketing, and marketing is important, but more importantly is once you get those people in the door, how are you going to retain them? What is your retention strategy, right? So these are important things to think about. So another challenge is tech, right? So back in the day, we got Payne Stewart here hitting on the Sport Tech Golf, which back then was probably just the coolest thing ever. But things have changed a lot, right? I don't know when this photo was taken, but I have a lot of friends from the SCPGA section that reference times when they were wheeling out big carts with golf cart batteries and computers and cameras and wires. And I was one of those guys too. I didn't necessarily have to do the whole battery cart thing, but I was bringing out my laptop, burning CDs and DVDs for everyone. So if you're not utilizing technology, and back in the day, this was cutting edge here with Payne, now you just have the phone or your tablet. It's never been easier to stay connected with your athletes, communicate around all sorts of different type of media. So as coaches, it's imperative that we don't have this fixed mindset per se, right? We have to have a growth mindset, just like we're asking our athletes. So it's always imperative to adjust with the times. And clearly you all do, because you're here. So I'm going to jump to just 2 more slides, and then I'm happy to take questions before I jump into just like a very brief product demo. I'll actually go through it live on my phone. But these are some of the folks that use the platform. I bring this up just because it just helps clarify where we are in the world and the type of the people that would be using this. Oh, excuse me here. So we have a partnership with Golf Digest. They do a lot of virtual coaching within the platform. Obviously, I mentioned IMG Academy. They have 300 plus coaches. And right now, I think they have about 17 or 18,000 kids in our platform that they're actively coaching. And it's a crazy amount of kids, I know. But through the platform, you're able to do individualized coaching as well as kind of small group or camp clinic type of coaching. So really the bulk of our customers are these academies or clubs where there's multiple coaches. But across the way, we have a ton of individual kind of solopreneurs, as I would call them, using the platform every day to grow their business. So some of the names here that you will obviously recognize. Cameron and Martin are actually advisors to us now, so I won't necessarily read their quotes, but you can see them there. They've been using it for a long time. Martin, or Cameron, I should say, is one of those guys that was trying to use all sorts of technology to bridge this gap. Before we met, he was using platforms that were designed for doctors or businesses, and these were things that I was using to try to just piece everything together from a communication collaboration aspect. Martin runs an amazing golf school. He's also the inventor of a number of products. I would encourage you, if you are looking to create more leverage in your life, there's 2 coaches I would really have you pay attention to. Martin would be one of them. The other would be a guy by the name of Will Robbins. And Will Robbins is, I think, very innovative in the group coaching model. And he uses our platform as well. So I want to encourage you all to, as you leave this, hopefully get a better sense of technology, some ideas around business models, and maybe some people to pay attention to. And then you've got Rob there in Canada, which is he's an awesome coach, and he clearly believes a lot in communication and sees us as a big help for that. So I'm going to dive into a little product demo here. I'm just going to have a little more water. My voice is just kind of shot for some reason. But again, if you guys have questions, please feel free to dive in and ask them. And so I'm going to close this down and just move a couple things around. So this is going to be a little bit smaller because I'm not entirely sure how to just do this. Let me just try one thing really quick if I can. Yeah, it's not giving me the option here. So hopefully you can see this. I know it's a bit small, but I'm just going to go through it really quickly if anybody's, since we're not necessarily seeing any questions come in. So as I said before, and I've kind of beat it up a little bit, right? We want to have an effective way to connect and communicate. So the way that we do it inside of CoachNow is that you have these 2 areas to do that. You've got spaces and you've got groups. Spaces for the individual, where you're focused on an individual. You can have multiple people in there. And then a group is just what it sounds like. It's focused on a group of people, whether that be a camp, a clinic, an after-school program, or a team, right? You can literally have teams in here as well. So as we scroll down on the spaces list, you're seeing an A to Z list of all the athletes that I work with and their different spaces, and some of them can have multiple spaces. Now, if we click into Christina, and I'm not going to show everything, but this is a young lady that I used to work with when I still had the time to do so when she was in college. And so as we scroll down, you're going to see, if I were to scroll down continually, you're going to see years and years and years of content. But for now, you're going to see videos, you're going to see links from her mental coach, and so on and so forth, right? And you're going to notice that a lot of this content was added by her. So she lives a couple hours away. I was able to actively coach her along with her other coach. and keep her and her dad in sync. And her dad's a TPI professional, so it's this very collaborative environment. So, and the way that you see that is you've got these different members in here, and you also have, in this case, just some fans following along and trying to see how she's doing. So when you're in session with someone, the way that you add something into their space, right? So if you look at the top, you're going to see Christina's name and her golf space. You just hit the big orange button. You can add any type of content that you like. So a lot of us are using other technologies that require you to capture, and then it doesn't really organize it. So when you go home, you have to then send it around, right? And we found that a lot of coaches spend, and I was one of them, I was on the high end, but a lot of coaches spend 10 to 20 hours a week, especially at the academy world, managing content, managing communications, and just trying to keep everybody on the same page. With CoachNow, luckily, they've been able to reduce that to almost nothing. And the reason why is because they can do most of this capture and sharing and whatnot in the actual session, so they don't have to go home and do things later. So you're going to see here that there's also analysis built in. So I'm not going to be able to go through an analysis when we do a screen share here, because it'll be a little tough to do so. But effectively what you're seeing here is all the basic line drawing tools that you're accustomed to. One of the biggest things that we do that nobody else does, though, is that you can move each and every tool to make sure you get the exact right angle. You're going to see a camera icon in the upper left where you can take a screenshot of this particular frame. So if we wanted to move this frame through, you could actually just take a screenshot of that. You can do traditional voiceovers, and you can do comparisons to this athlete, models in your library, or even other athletes that you are coaching. Now, the biggest difference about what we do in comparison to other platforms, though, is that we care about the communication part of it, right? The ability to stay in sync. So as a part of that, you're going to see that I've already analyzed Christina's swing here, right? So you've got a line there. And then I was able to add another swing right underneath it with my thoughts as well. And if her dad or other people started chiming in, you would see this long kind of conversation here. And this is all very common things, right? In our normal social media life, we believe that it's very important to make sure that that kind of behavior and communication is within your coaching life as well. So if we back out, again, you're going to have this A to Z list of everybody here. Now, if we go into the groups, I'm going to scroll down to this soccer example here. And you're going to see that within groups, you have the opportunity to create channels. Channels allow you to organize your content as well as your people. So let's say, for example, you're running a golf camp or a golf school, and you want it to be more in this group environment where everyone's participating, right? So a group, again, is like a Facebook group or a text message group where when you post things in certain channels, everyone will see them. But I think it's important to recognize that each channel can have a different amount of members, right? So you can have these different topics that you're talking about where everyone is a part of the conversation, or you can kind of silo things off if you feel like that's more appropriate. So in this world, within golf, you could have drills, practice, you could have nutrition, you could have long game, short game, all these different ways to put it together. And you're allowed to then organize the content however you like, and capturing the content works just the same. Now, I'm showing you the mobile phone. We're available on tablets as well as the computer. You have a library here where you can store all of your drills, all of your content, and you can reuse that with anybody at any time. And then we also have another feature called segments, which allows you to do some bulk actions. So I've talked about the spaces for individual communication, the groups where it's more of like that group text. Segments allow you to do bulk actions like send, in my junior segment, I can send a post to each one of these spaces. It goes out to everyone, but the different spaces here don't know that I sent it to someone else. So Amelia and Casey don't know that I sent this message to everybody else. So an example of that would be, hey, how is practice going? Right? I'm not including a name, being somewhat vague. I could send that post to everybody, and then they would be able to respond in kind in their individual spaces without anybody else knowing. So Martin Chuck, he's got, I think, somewhere around 3,500 to 4,000 people in this platform, and he's able to blast message them golf school updates or quick tips, things like that, to keep everybody engaged, right? That's that retention piece, keep people focused. And the last thing I'll show you here is we do have a feed, and the feed is the recent activity across all of the spaces and teams that you're a part of. So then you have the opportunity to really stay kind of in sync with what's going on. So kind of recapping here as hopefully we get some questions coming in. Recapping here, again, if we go back to the presentation, it's our belief that you can stay in front of your athletes, you're gonna retain them, you're gonna grow a bigger business. If you give them a record of your interactions, right, you're gonna be able to resell them on whatever packages or subscriptions that you like. We have hundreds of professional golfers within this platform all over the world, and their coaches are always saying it's so great to be able to collaborate with their fitness professionals, keep their caddies in sync. And then when an athlete at that level is struggling, they can look back and see what they were doing when they were performing their best from a fitness standpoint, a club fitting standpoint, or anything in between, because you can house all of that data within the platform. So with that, I'm going to pause for a second, take a drink of water. John, I don't know if there's any questions coming in from the group, but I just want to kind of pause and maybe you've got a couple questions as well.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Spencer. You had mentioned the key aspect that separates GolfNow from other coaching platforms. Can you name a couple other key differences that set you apart?
Yeah, so within CoachNow, again, the collaboration aspect is a big deal. And that definitely separates us because we believe that you need to be able to stay in sync with everybody that's involved. We don't want to have this siloed experience. If we go into the, let me just scroll up to another young lady here. If we just look here, right? So your athletes within our platform, you can have different areas to organize things. So organization would be a big thing that separates us as well. And there's multiple levels of organization. So you can see on the previous screen, I had spaces and groups, right? So these different areas to communicate at different levels. Each athlete can have multiple spaces that you're involved in as well that keeps it kind of private just for that athlete. So if you're the type of coach that believes that your athlete is kind of a well-rounded person and they need other areas to focus on, you can do that. So as Amelia here, a young girl that now plays for New Mexico, who I was coaching for a long time, she's got fitness and golf, and then in the technical information, I think she has some really old club fitting data. Yeah, so, and some of the wedge distances and things like that. So this allows you to have this deeper organization. And then if we go, I'll just kind of show you my golf space as well. I've got a lot of different spaces here. So if I go into the one that I mostly use, you're going to see that I have these little gray words here or kind of things at the bottom, and those are the tags. So if you search through all of the posts, and I won't do that now, but just to give you an example, you can search through all of the content and pull up relative information. So you could say, I want to see all the drivers from face on over a particular period of time, and the whole space will reorganize itself to allow that. So because we believe so much in that context and that progress tracking, not only do we have the timeline that's just scrollable here, but you also have the option to find everything deeply. And I would maybe say while I'm here as well, as you can see, there's the audio note. Most other coaching tools that you guys might be familiar with are straight video only, and they're video for purely the technical component. We believe that you need to be able to communicate with all the different types of media, and sometimes it's just appropriate to leave an audio note. Other times it's appropriate to do a text note. We also want to encourage you to leave the camera rolling and capture learning moments, not just technical moments. So as you're out there on the lesson tee, it would be, hey, what did you learn today? A little recap, as we call it. And you can interview the athlete, drop that in their space, and then they have it forever. And you're giving them an opportunity to talk about what they learned in their own words, their own voice. And if they're a youth athlete, mom and dad, if they're not there, get a chance to really see what was retained or grasped from that day. So those would be some other separators. The multimedia aspect and the deep level of organization, I think, are some big things for us. And
we didn't mention price point.
Yes, so price point, normally it's either $39.99 a month or $2.99 a year. We do not, how should I put this? You do not have to pay for athletes as they come in. So there's some other tools out there across all sorts of different software world where you pay per seat. So you go, okay, well, I'm going to use it for 10 athletes, I pay this. I'm going to use it for 20 athletes, I pay this. Our goal is to help you build your business as big as possible. So we do not want you to kind of think about who you're going to use it with or who you're not. So once you pay the $299 for the annual price, you're in, and you can grow this as big as you want. Use it with as many athletes as you want. We're not going to block you there. But I will say, during COVID and all this crazy time, and because of our relationship with the SCPGA, we're offering a 25% discount on that annual plan. So that puts you down kind of in the 220s roughly for your first year, and you can use it. And then if you are someone that's working with multiple coaches, we'll apply that same discount to you. And then even in the longer term, we'll give you a group discount if you're working with multiple coaches. So hopefully that answers that question.
You said 25% discount because of your relationship with the SCPGA. You meant the SCPGA?
Yes, excuse me, sorry, yes.
Okay.
Yes, and we're doing that largely because we want to make sure that a lot of you are still working in an environment where you're doing a little bit in person, you're doing remote, and if you're here, you maybe don't know about how to use, you're not comfortable utilizing this technology. So we want to do everything we can, not only educate you here, but we have a lot of education elsewhere that you can tap into, whether it be other webinars where you can go deeper into the product specifics. I have other webinars that I've recorded and will continue to do that focus on the ins and outs of all the aspects of remote coaching, from the marketing to lead generation to closing deals, all of that. So we want to make sure that not only you get that good solid 2-week free trial, which I didn't mention what you would get if you're a new customer of ours or just trying it out, but you can get that 25% discount to kind of limit some of your risk or your worry about spending money right now to grow your business.
Very impressive. It's marvelous to see that CoachNow utilizes communication very similar to how Instagram and Facebook and even Snapchat can communicate with multiple people on an ongoing basis. Is very relevant to be that connected, especially with the younger generation. Where do you see CoachNow going over the next 3 to 5 years?
Great question. Yeah, and I appreciate you kind of paralleling it to these other things. So as I answer this, I'll kind of address what you first said too, is that this is your social coaching platform. It is private by default though, and I do want you to everyone to make sure they understand this, is that there is no search engine, meaning that once you bring your athletes in, there's no way for them to see other coaches or to be marketed to. They're not going to be distracted with other content. So as you mentioned, these other platforms, they're incredibly awesome platforms, but they're incredibly distracted, right? So it's not a good place to communicate if you want people to really focus on what they're doing. So we made that choice early on. So we're not here to necessarily have you find new leads of customers, right? At this moment, but within the platform, once you're here, it's your private universe. So moving on to the bigger question, our core focus is to help coaches maximize their business, right? So you're gonna, excuse me, you're gonna build deeper relationships with everybody that's key to doing so, and we're gonna help you grow your business. So some of the things that we're gonna be bringing in is lead generation, but through partnerships. So I can't speak to those partners now, but in the golf world, there's a couple partnerships that we're working on that would likely get golf professionals that are a part of the CoachNow universe, right? They're a subscriber of what we're doing. You get access to 2 or 3 million golfers through some of these partnerships that will at least get you some awareness, and then you can coach them through our tool. We're going to be introducing some AI, artificial intelligence kind of aspects to the platform to become more of your assistant coach. So that would range anywhere from kind of content delivery as well as kind of smart analysis of sorts, right? Automated analysis type things. This doesn't affect necessarily everybody on the call per se, but if you are looking to deliver remote coaching overseas, we're in 140 countries, so localization of our platform is a big deal. We have a lot of customers in China, so we're going to be making sure that our platform is in the language necessary to do that. Beyond that, we're going to simplify the platform even more through some of the things that we're doing. We're going to introduce some partnerships, likely with some billing components and other tools as well. So our goal, without being super specific, because I don't want to commit to things that might take a while, is to continue to create this hub where you feel like CoachNow is more and more of your one-stop shop, so to speak. And I will say though, if you are using TrackMan and these other great tools, I would encourage you to recognize that you can add that content in here by either sending PDFs in or even taking screenshots so you can house all of that kind of disparate data within our platform. So those are some of the things that we're going to be working on, but it's always tricky for me as the head of the technology to dance the line of over-promising and under-delivering, because technology takes a long time. It takes a lot longer than you would think.
You touched on that right now, and I got a question that came in. Does it currently have the capability for taking registrations and bookings now? And can it collect fees now?
We do not. And the reason why we made that decision is because there's dozens and dozens of other platforms that have invested millions of dollars in just doing that. So typically how we work with those other platforms is that each of those platforms has a unique registration link, right? A URL that you're sending people, and they can be booked through that platform. So a lot of coaches just include that link within a space, like in a post or in a group or things like that. But our future plan, and this is not too far down the line, is to build better dashboards, better kind of visualizations, so that if you are using any tool that you like, from MindBody to USchedule to Calendly to Square, I mean, there's all sorts of different platforms you can use for scheduling and billing, that you can integrate those a little more seamlessly with us, because it doesn't necessarily make sense for us to rebuild things that people are already using. Our aim is to help you integrate those experiences a little bit more into a platform like ours. So we like to focus on what we're good at and try to build bridges with the other specific things that coaches might use.
Fantastic. We don't have any further questions that have come in. Spencer, on behalf of the Education Committee for the Southern California PGA, thank you so much for volunteering your time today to educate us on the benefits of CoachNow. Can't think of a more relevant time for that app to be out there, and had a very good attendance this morning on this morning's Catalyst, over 60 people that tuned in. So hopefully they got a tremendous amount out of the education on CoachNow. Want to remind everybody that the Catalyst webinar series is taking place on a weekly basis, and want to encourage everybody to be on next week's Catalyst. We will have the one and only Gary McCord on the Catalyst webinar. Not sure yet if he's going to actually have a PowerPoint presentation, or if we'll be using the GoToWebinar format. It might be a call-in conference call. I'm going to try to steer him into a presentation of sorts, so that the registration can remain for everybody the same way we always do. But very excited to get a big name on like that. I'm sure he's going to be a great interview and will be quite candid with us. So, and also want to thank Mr. Addis for setting that Catalyst up. Thank you everybody for being on the Catalyst webinar this morning. Thank you, Mr. Dennis, for your time and expertise. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, stay sane.
All right, thanks for having me. Bye, everybody.